what would you say to someone thinking of setting up a tech conference event in 2025?
I'd probably say you're absolutely fucking insane, to be honest. Hello and welcome to Off Script. Today we're going to be talking about how I put together a tech conference, and we're going to do a behind the scenes look into what it takes to put on a conference.
So Josh, how do you run the perfect tech conference?
Well, I'm glad you asked. I thought it'd be good to talk a little bit about the behind the scenes version of how the conference is put together. Obviously, in recent years, you've become really heavily involved in helping me run the conference, which is amazing. Couldn't do without you. And I think it takes a sort of small group of people to put together a really high quality production.
Takes a village, etc. But there's a lot of stuff that you do that we don't see, which is all the pre-planning, the schedules, the booking of the speakers, and all of that governs, which is actually a lot of work. And it's on top of all the rest of it. But it's really important, isn't it? So what's your kind of first step? How would you sort of like set your stall out?
So the conference has been going for almost 9 years now, and the sort of reason I started the conference and the sort of vision for it hasn't really changed in that time. So the idea was always to be an inclusive and accessible event that didn't go to like hard and heavy on like multiple tracks and here are the things you have to take away from this. And for me, it was all about positioning local and international talent on the stage to talk about all the interesting things going on in the industry. So whether that's emerging tech, whether that's cool stuff we're building, whether it's really creative implementations of tech, just a bit of a celebration of our industry and the talent and diverse sort of thought leadership we have within it.
Yeah, I guess you've got two problems. You need to figure out what's cool, what's current, but also you've got to sell tickets, otherwise it's not viable. So it's like it has to deliver actual value to people. It needs to be a good learning experience. So what would you then, how would you take that problem and like how do you consider sort of your target audience and the outcomes and things like that?
So I think for me it's about how, like, what are the takeaways for those particular people you want to come. So for me it was always around like engineers, web developers, UX designers. More recently been considering people in leadership positions as well. So like I've gone into more leadership roles throughout the last 10 years of my career, and I think it's really valuable to get leaders on board with what the creators in the industry are doing too. So for me, looking at that target audience across the sort of IC roles, I guess, and into the management roles, looking at what the takeaways that they can take back to the teams that they work with and implement things. So whether it's around like tools they use or like new processes or ways of doing things in the industry. It might also be on like emerging tech. I've been quite careful not to go too heavily into AI as like a concentrated theme. The same way that I steered away from sort of Web3, which is not the same sort of thing as AI. But I think I didn't want to jump too hard on a trend because I think when things become really trendy in tech, people get quite bored of them because there's all that people talk about, like Web3 and crypto and all that sort of stuff.
There's a lot of people saying the same things over and over.
Yeah. And also I think it's important to ensure that some of these things that we're talking about are reasonably well validated. I don't want it to be something that is never used in practice and not useful for people in their careers, really. So that it has to have a takeaway for me.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in previous talks, previous conferences, there's always been like the fun talk where it's like, playing around with audio stuff or it's got interactive stuff. And this year you've got web MIDI stuff going on there as well. Yeah. But I guess there's more of a sort of experimentation and learning angle around that where you're just playing with like new tech. And
and I think showing people how to play with tech, right? And showing like, because I remember I saw Katie's talk actually last year, Katie Fenn's talk, who's doing the closing talk of the conference, and it's all about recreating Daft Punks around the world in web MIDI. But I think it's when you see someone piece that sort of thing together in real time in a browser, it opens up new ways for you to create and see the world. So I just think that sort of stuff's really interesting.
Makes sense. And it kind of plays into what we were saying in the last episode about energy levels. Like you've got to sort of plan out, like, you start on a nice opener and then, in the real tricky slot is that post lunchtime slot.
Everyone's full.
Yeah, that's it. So how do you plan out? Like you take your sort of potential speaker list. How do you sort of like plan the day?
Yeah, so we don't do any keynotes. Like, there's no big keynote. Everyone who speaks at the conference gets paid the same. We pay an honorarium to all speakers. But I do try and mix up the format between, like, where's the thought leadership topics, where are the technical deep dives, where are the more sort of live coding and creative things that we want to just showcase, the latest web tech or something like that. And then we've got the lightning talks, which is, I find, a really good way post lunch to get everyone like excited again.
It's like bang, bang, bang. Here's 3 completely different things straight after each other, and hopefully wakes people up. Yeah,
literally like, hello, we are back from the break.
And certainly wakes Jack up with the 3 laptop switch. But yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's important to come back from the lunch with some high energy, fast paced presentations. These are often talking about, topics that are really important to the community, like projects that are community focused, or just like really quick talks that are going to try and make someone think differently on something.
Yeah, and they've always been a really big hit. And and even if there's little technical blips, Phil does an amazing job at just sort of making it seem like everything's fine. And he'll even just call it out and go, "Yeah, it's everything's on fire," but he makes everyone feel so comfortable about it that it actually doesn't matter, does it?
Yeah, he's basically the "this is fine" dog on stage at that point. But yeah, I think it's really, those talks are really exciting for me because it also gives first-time speakers an opportunity to get up there. I remember we had Mark McWhirter last year talking about his side hustle as a pizza business and how that applied to some of the stuff he did at work. And I find that really interesting, that sort of crossover between like hobby and career and how that works. But yeah, so this year we've got some great speakers. We've got Lola from W3C. We've got, Sarah from the F1 Arcade. We've got Andy from Set Studio coming back and talking, and Katie and Thalita from Create Future. So these are all speakers that I've tried to think about, right, how does the day flow? So I wanted to start off with like a really interesting, thoughtful, like reflective topic, which is like, how do we look at accessibility? How do we think of people who may have disabilities that stop them using, our work and what we build?
Yeah.
Start off with a strong topic, set the scene a little bit that, this is a day that you're going to learn some stuff that you're going to be able to use in your daily work. And, the same for Thalita's talk, really. That's a topic about how you can actually use AI in a really practical way to build really powerful products. Really key not to have this, a talk solely about some of the more mundane uses of AI and some of the things that maybe you can't take back and implement in your work.
No, it makes sense. So going behind the scenes a little bit, so you've arrived at these amazing speakers. What's the process of getting there? How do you pick and choose? I know it's quite difficult to prioritize and figure out which speakers to reach out to, and you'll have seen some of these speakers at previous talks, but what's your process there? Is it kind of like pick a few and try and find a nice blend? Or
I think so, yeah. So I do tend to, if I go and see a talk and I'm like, this is amazing, it'd be perfect for All Day Hey, I definitely reach out to them like individually. I think the whole point of All Day Hey for me is it's a curated conference. I believe that from my experience in the industry and from the people that I surround myself with, I have a good exposure to the diverse range of topics that are going to make a good conference. So it's a curated conference. We don't currently have a CFP, for example. It's not something that we open up to lots of submissions of talks. Yeah, so I do this because I think it's really important to have a conference schedule that flows, and I really like the idea that I can sort of handpick some of the topics that I feel are really important pillars of the day.
Yeah.
So I usually approach speakers I've seen before, or I try and find new speakers that haven't spoke. Like, for example, Jay Tompkins, his first ever conference talk was at All Day Hey.
Oh, nice.
He was doing loads of really cool demos and like code ideas on Twitter at the time, and I was like, this would make an amazing talk. Pitched that to him. He was really up for it. And there we went, really. I think it's a good mixture of seeing talent that you want to put on stage and people who you've seen before.
I guess a lot of like multi-track conferences will have a CFP process where they get lots of people sort of pitching ideas, which are almost like salesy leaning talks, and they might even have paid speakers that pay to come and speak at the conference. Like, I don't know if you've been to DTX and conferences like that where you've got a big floor of like sponsors and stuff like that. Yeah, so some of these conferences where they're free to attend, that you're really the product in those, and then there's conferences sort of in between where you do pay for an expensive ticket, but they do actually have slots where companies have paid to present in the keynote slots and things like that, and you can tell a mile off that that's not a curated agenda. It's like, oh, this is sponsored by Datadog, or not specifically calling out Datadog, great product, but will accept sponsorship. But it is tricky, right? You don't want to just have people sit through an advert for half a day.
Yeah. So I've always made a rule that if you sponsor, you don't get given a talk. Yeah. You don't get to speak like that. There may be a situation where I approach someone to speak and then they offer to sponsor or something like that, which has happened in the past. But yeah, in general, I just don't think it results in good content and good takeaways.
Yeah, and I think the sponsors that you've got would agree that they're happy supporting and promoting the conference without having to bore people to death with what they want to sell them.
Yeah. Well, if you've got a good product, you can point people in the direction and they'll make their own mind up, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it's down to that right mix of speakers, right? So you want the right mix of those sort of community rising stars, like I mentioned with Jay, who was first to speak, and then you've got like industry experts that have maybe talked about a similar topic for a long time, or you also want to welcome diverse perspectives into the mix as well. And I think it's really important that you try and figure out those topics or speakers that aren't getting getting the airtime, getting the chance to tell their side of the industry. I think all those things are important.
Yeah, and inevitably, people with the most money, these other conferences, like that's not a very diverse and inclusive way of including different voices. It's just here's all the people with the most cash in running order. It does feel a lot more like a community focused kind of event as All Day Hey.
Yeah, I think that's sort of a decision you have to make these days when you're running events and conferences. You have to decide what sort of shape event you want to run. If you want to run one that is more corporate or aimed at the enterprise, then you go for those multi-track ones, because you're trying to say, look, this ticket that's $1,000 is going to give you access to 100 talks and maybe 10 of them are useful to your workforce. But I don't want that. I want a conference that is like value in terms of inspiring people and showing them like what's the cutting edge stuff that's happening in our industry, and what are the things that you should be aware of if you're building accessible apps, for example, things like that.
No, it makes total sense. So we've talked a little bit about, how you plan out the day, how we fight that sort of post-lunch lull.
Yeah.
How do you get people, make sure people are talking to each other? How do you provide that structure? You've got a little rule that you like to enforce.
Yep. That was nicked from Mark's here, actually. Yeah, so the Pac-Man rule is something I first found out about at Beyond Tellerand, and it's a way to basically say to attendees, look, you're here, and you as part of the code of conduct, we expect you to sort of be friendly to other attendees and welcome people who may want to network and learn from other people who they're around. So the idea of the Pac-Man rule is you always leave a space in your group for people to sort of slot themselves into and start chatting to you. But in general, we try to give plenty of padding throughout the breaks. There's a really good networking sort of social after to make sure people can sort of debrief and chat about the day.
Nice.
But for me, the social aspect and the sort of networking aspect is just as important in terms of getting, especially for the north as well. I think there's not a huge amount of events like there is in London, for example. I think it's really important we bring the community together and get people talking about what they're up to. And, we might make really valuable introductions that people would never have normally had, which could lead to some really exciting things.
Nice. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that sort of little chat after a talk is what helps some people reinforce the learning as well, and like having a little, that bit was really interesting, and it's kind of like that key moment that they could take away and then share at work. Whereas if they're just sat there in silence and then gone home and not spoke to anyone, it's kind of like only half the experience, isn't it? It's not the full. It's not the full conference.
The debrief, because what I like is the final talk of the conference either ends on a really big bang, like a big live coding thing or something that's you're likely to not have seen before, or a really reflective talk. So like last year we had Imran's talk, on the art of reflection, for example. Nice. And I think I love that one because it leaves people going to the sort of social going, what did you take away from that? Because it made me really think about this, or I didn't like it because it made me feel this way, or I really liked it because actually it made me think I need to spend more time in this area. And I like the fact that you can have people having completely different polar opposite views of things, and that also inspires like more conversation on the topic.
Yeah, no, I think it's really good, and it's a really nice space, and you've got amazing coffee and, you know, structured sort of breaks so that people can go and chat to each other.
Yeah.
Is there any sort of recommendations for other conference organisers? How would they create that space in their own setup? It's a must, right?
I think so. There's a few things for me that I won't compromise on. There's the production quality is always really important to me. So making sure we've got good AV, making sure we've got comfy sofas, making sure the projector display is like bang on. Like we've got this beautiful 65-foot cinema display in Everyman, and it's amazing. Almost to the point where I can't actually move from Everyman now because everyone loves the setup so much.
Yeah, when they open the doors in the morning, that's quite nice.
Yeah.
They didn't let us in last time.
It was a bit of a challenge.
You were blissfully unaware having a child and all that, so, while me and Jack were looking like sad sheep outside the back entrance of Everyman Cinema with all of the gear and no idea.
And no ability to get into the venue,
Yeah, some mild panic.
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's not your fault.
But yeah, I think apart from those mishaps, I think there is definitely a situation where you need to just invest in that production quality. You need to respect that people are giving you their hard-earned cash, and they want to have a good experience with that. So, as you said, good refreshments. You know, always good coffee and tea and everything.
It's sort of brilliant basics, not good audio quality. They can see the slides, you know.
All the usuals.
You'd be surprised, though. Like, some conferences don't get that right. Like, open auditorium with 2 or 3 talks next to each other, and you're like, I can't hear this.
Yeah.
And then you get someone who's got like almost silent disco style headphones, and they never connect properly. And like,
I just think as well, like wearing them all day is hard.
Yeah, it does kind of solve the problem, but then introduce another, because now you can't talk to people around you about it.
Yeah,
because you're just locked in on headphones,
and they're terrible for accessibility as well. So yeah, all these sorts of things you got to think about. But yeah, I think trying to invest in making it a really comfy space, because if people feel comfortable, they're going to feel more open-minded and like vulnerable to talk about things that they wouldn't normally talk about, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
So yeah.
What would you say to someone thinking of setting up a tech conference event in 2025? Like, what would you advise me to look out for or think about?
I'd probably say you're absolutely fucking insane, to be honest.
Yep.
I think the shape of events has changed quite significantly over the last 10 years, for example. And I think it's become harder to get like those rooms full. I think we're doing good for now. I think we have a good event that people feel connected to, and that's great. But building that sort of equity up takes a lot of time. So I think you need to make sure that you're solving a problem, you're creating community, you're creating trust where people want to come and share stories. I think it's, any paid event is hard at the moment, particularly if you look at what's going on in hospitality, it's really hard to get bums on seats.
So even when you do all the basics right, you get, all the AV, you get the venue, you get the amazing speakers, the lineup, everything. It all relies on people actually buying the tickets.
Yeah.
And now, what used to sell out months and months in advance, now everyone's leaving it to the last minute to buy tickets, which makes it like a game of chicken with the finances of an event.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think it's, it's one of those things where if you like these sort of things and you tend to go to them, just doing that extra sort of, buying a ticket a bit early or whatever really goes to ensure the sustainability. And I'm not just talking about all day here, I'm talking about any tech conference or any sort of hospitality sort of event either. Like these sort of events rely on people committing to coming and supporting them and spreading word of mouth is the biggest thing. Like if you're going, or even if you're not and you think it's good, tell your friends, like share the news of these things happening, because before we know it, there might be a situation where there's just a whole influx of enterprisey corporate events and much less of these sort of indie community focused ones. And I think that would be a really sad thing to see happen.
Yeah, if we just left with the DTXs of the world, it would be a very sad state of affairs.
I think so. Or you get people who, tend to try and use the community as a sales tactic with actually no real understanding or ability to look after that community. I think we've seen that in recent years. I can't remember the name of the one that went really badly in London. And I won't mention the person who was meant to be running it. But yeah, I think, you have people that tend to use it for clout and for marketing collateral and not for the real reason, which is we want to sort of support diverse conversation and support our community. And yeah, I just think it'd be really sad to see those things go.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess the overarching message is it's really tough, but if people can support early and often, that would be good.
Yeah, and come along. This year's is going to be really good. We've got some great speakers on. As we mentioned, we've got talks on AI and accessibility, and Sarah's talk on digital exclusion is a really good one. Saw that FF Conf a few years ago. But we've got Andy back, who's doing a great talk about sort of culture and how you can sort of use core skills in your teams. And yeah, Kate is just a great one to end the day on, which is just creating Daft Punk live.
Amazing.
It's amazing.
Sounds really good. Well, thank you, Josh.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks for listening to Off Script. Hopefully you enjoyed this look behind the scenes at how we put together a tech conference. Hit subscribe for more in the future. Cheers.